this opportunity and welcome everyone to welcome to another episode of Ask the Experts podcast. Welcome everyone to Ask the Experts podcast. We are grateful to have you. And today we have a very special guest, Gabe Karp. Gabe is a former trial attorney. He is a conflict resolution expert and the author of Don't Get Mad at Penguins. Gabe, welcome to the
Hi,
show.
Alka. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, well, the first question is what can you define what is a good conflict and how to recognize these conflicts, whether it be family, social, or any environment? How do we recognize these conflicts?
Sure. Uh, to recognize a good conflict, I think it's important to just kind of lay the groundwork that anytime humans interact, conflict is inevitable. Conflicts will come up, and there's toxic conflict and there's healthy conflict. The toxic conflicts end with people on either side being worse off than they were when they went in. A healthy conflict, a good conflict, is when people work through the conflict together. And on the other side of that conflict, there's a deeper relationship, a stronger relationship. There's a better result. Maybe value was created in that. And it can take the form of so many things. We talk about business, but there's no different in our personal lives, in our relationships with family members, friends, loved ones.
Right. What are some of the strategies or advice you have that we can identify these conflicts anytime they occur and identify the toxins in the conflicts, and how do we turn these toxins into a positive?
That's a great question. I think about toxins as the things that naturally occur in human interactions. Toxins such as anger, fear, ego, judgment. These are all naturally occurring in human interaction, and they all have optimal levels. You know, anger can be a very powerful motivator to fix things that are broken. Fear is a great tool that keeps us out of danger and prevents us from going down a path that is destructive for us. Ego allows us to make sure that our contributions are recognized. And that we don't let people walk over us, and our judgments allow us to assess situations. But each of these things, either too much or too little of them, become toxic. Too much anger in a conflict with somebody is going to make that a toxic interaction. So one of the key things to think about is, okay, what are the general sources of conflict? Well, one is that we're socialized from a young age to shy away from conflict. We soften bad news, we sugarcoat feedback. We're taught if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. We also have a billion years of evolution hard coded into our DNA. We have a survival fight or flight instinct, and it's prehistoric. And when that instinct is triggered, things happen in our brains. We have cortisol and adrenaline flood into our bloodstream. Neurology shuts down access to the part of our brain where we can think. And that was extremely helpful when our ancestors were facing a saber-toothed tiger. But when you're in an interaction with a loved one or a business person, that drives a very poor use of conflict. So one thing to do is just, you asked, how do you recognize it?
Yes.
Think about when you're going into a difficult conversation, be prepared. At some point, you may feel the physiological effects of conflict. The hair on the back of your neck stands up. Your heart starts racing. Your breathing becomes rapid and shallow. When that happens, just stop. Take a beat. Take just one deliberate breath. That's going to pull you out of an instinctive response and into intellectual awareness. That allows you to at least say, okay, I have a survival instinct that's been triggered, and I just arrested that process.
Mm.
You'll still feel jittery, you'll still feel jumpy, but your mind will now be reconnected to your conscious. You'll be able to think and move through it. And you can say, okay, it's okay, I feel jumpy. It's okay, I feel jittery. I can see that the other person is equally triggered. Let me tone this down and take us to a more intellectual place as opposed to acting out of pure wild instinct.
The origin of your book, Gabe, absolutely love. Where did the origin "Don't Get Mad at Penguins" come from?
So there is a chapter called Don't Get Mad at Penguins Because They Can't Fly. And this is really a lesson in acceptance that we should accept people's limitations and not expect them to do things that they're not capable of, even though we may really, really want them to. And one of the things that makes this such a challenge is that oftentimes it's hard to see someone's limitations, especially when everything else we know about them suggests that they're not limited. So take the penguin, for example. What do you mean a penguin can't fly? It's a bird, it's got wings, it's got feathers, and birds with wings and feathers can fly. Except that penguins can't. Flight is literally beyond their ability. And we could choose to get mad at that or we can accept it. So we often find ourselves dealing with someone who's continually falling short of our expectations. And we often get angry or frustrated with them because we believe they're capable of meeting our expectations and they're making a choice not to. And if, by the way, if that were true, it would be appropriate to get mad at that person. But if you're expecting someone to do something they're literally not capable of, maybe being more sophisticated in how they approach an issue or being less emotional when in fact they are an emotional human being, you got to recognize they're not making a choice. And you can get mad at them for their behavior, but that's like getting mad at a penguin because it can't fly. It's not going to get you anywhere.
Right. How would you go past someone's limitation when you
Well,
know they are limited to a certain extent? How would you go past that?
yeah, I think once you recognize that you're dealing with a penguin and this person truly is not limited, now you can look at the situation through a completely different lens. Let's take an extreme easy example. You're dealing with a 5-year-old child who is throwing a tantrum because I don't know, their cookie fell on the floor. And maybe they're lashing out at you and they're being mean to you. Well, don't take their anger personally. They're not capable of making the choice to get angry with you. They're too young to have figured out how to manage their own emotions in this world. They're on the path to it and they will one day, but they're not there now. So, how do you move past that? If you believed that the 5-year-old child was capable of managing their emotions, then you would probably get angry right back at them. And if they yell at you, you yell back and say, "You can't talk to me that way. How dare you?" And you start screaming at a 5-year-old child. But if you recognize that they're a 5-year-old and they don't have the ability, you would take a step back and you would just kind of help them through it. Look, I know it's upsetting that your cookie fell, but there are other cookies, or maybe next time you'll be more careful and not let it fall. Whatever it is, however you want to deal with it, you're not going to approach that child with anger. You're going to approach that child understanding where that child's limitations are, and you're going to meet them on that level. And we have a lot of people that may be in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and certain aspects of them stopped maturing when they were children. So you might be dealing with like the 5-year-old version of a 50-year-old person. And the hard thing is to recognize that, because when somebody looks 50, it looks like they can manage their emotions extremely well. And in my experience, that is just not the case.
Exactly. Well, everyone, we are different in how we, manage our emotions. But generally speaking, though, Gabe, not many people think of conflicts as a positive. We always think as a negative. But then, the 4 areas that you mentioned in your book are fear, judgment, anger. And you've distilled these 4 toxins. Can you share with us those 4 areas that you've distilled as to how people can overcome?
Yeah. So judgment, fear, um, anger, and ego. Ego's a big one.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
let's take ego for an example. We all have ego, and ego can drive behavior into toxic territory. When
Hmm.
you are dealing with someone and you realize that their ego is driving the conflict, my advice is feed their ego. It'll cost you nothing. I mean, there's a saying in the book that says catering to your own ego is costly, but catering to someone else's ego is free. So when you recognize that somebody is driving toxic behavior in your interaction with them, recognize that they have a need to feel powerful. So just tell them they're
Right.
powerful and respectfully ask to not use their power to hurt you. And don't do it in a condescending way. That's just going to escalate the conflict even worse. But in my experience and many others who I've spoken to, once you have satisfied that need that people have to feel powerful, then they become agreeable, accommodating, and a willing participant to work with you in resolving whatever the issue is. Because they no longer have to spend time proving their self worth. You've given that to them, and it's cost you literally nothing to give that to them.
Right, exactly. It's how you, um, in a soothing way, it's the conversation that you're having that makes them feel that, they are less of, but it's how you say it in a manner that makes them feel that way. And Gabe, also in your book, you talked about the expectation gap, the expectation and the reality. Can you share with our audience as to how that is so important?
Yeah,
Knowing you have the expectation, but the reality.
right. This actually goes back to the penguin analogy. The
Mhm.
the the gap between expectation and reality, like that is where we suffer. So if we expect someone to do something that they're literally not capable of, our expectation does not match the reality. And inside that gap is where frustration and anger and anxiety can flourish. So the key is make sure you've got an accurate assessment of this situation. And the overwhelming majority of people never even ask that question of themselves consciously. Merely asking that question is going to put you in a completely different mind frame. And you'll no longer be trying to defend or attack someone else, defend your own position or attack someone else's position. You're going to be approaching it with curiosity. You're going to try to understand, wait, am I angry here at somebody for the wrong reason? Am I expecting this person to do something they're not capable of doing? And
Right.
having that question in your mind is going to drive very different behavior. You're probably going to start asking the other person questions to probe to find out the answer. Are they making a choice to do this, or do they not realize that they're doing it? That alone can take something from a toxic environment into a healthy environment.
Right. And Gabe, also in your, you've had a very successful career as a trial attorney, a former trial attorney, and you're a speaker, you're an author. Did you envision becoming a speaker? Was that ever in your radar?
Never. I was a trial lawyer for over a decade, and then I left the private practice law and joined a small tech startup. And then we grew it pretty large. So I became an executive in a technology company, um, and still never thought I'd be a keynote speaker. But I really focused on conflict because I knew that when we were growing our company, uh, we had to embrace these conflicts in a healthy way. That way we could resolve things faster, make money faster, grow careers in a more healthy way. And I just enjoyed doing it. And I worked hard to figure out how to make the people around me comfortable with conflict. And the tools and tactics I developed became basically the foundation of a keynote speech and a book and what I do today.
Absolutely. And you've had a very successful career, Gabe. So the book, Don't Get Mad at Penguins, did that derive from your personal life or your
Yeah,
professional life as well?
it actually began, that title, by the way, began with a conversation I was having with someone 10 years earlier, where she was telling
Mhm.
me about a frustrating situation. And I said, "You're getting mad at a penguin because it can't fly." And she said, "What the hell are you talking about?" And then I explained to her
Yeah.
the logic behind it. But from that, I had developed a series of super easy to remember, very easy to use, and highly effective tactics that other people came back to me weeks and months later saying, "Hey, you told me this thing to do, and it worked perfectly for me. I use it all the time." And I thought, "Oh,
Mhm.
maybe I'm onto something here." And that became the foundation of writing the book and speaking. And there's a great TEDx talk I did called "How to Thrive with Difficult People." It's only 8 minutes, and that will give you a nice synopsis of some of this stuff too.
That's beautiful, beautiful. Can you share with our audience three life lessons from your success that you've had as a former trial attorney, uh, now a conflict resolution expert? What are the three life lessons that people can take away and implement in their lives?
One life lesson it took me a while to learn was that I had to keep my ego in check, and that because as a lawyer, you're trained to win arguments. So any
Mhm.
argument I got in, whether it was at the Thanksgiving dinner table or at work or anywhere else, I needed to win, and that drives some bad behavior and kind of makes you a jerk. And the life lesson for me that I came away from it, it's more important to be happy than it and successful than it is to be right or to win. That's a
Mhm.
huge one. Um, the other life lesson was to become acutely aware of my own physiological responses to conflict. That when I get triggered in a situation, I can tell myself, wait a second, I'm being triggered. I got to take a step back. And that sounds like a really hard thing to do, but I will tell you, the hardest part is just remembering to do it. And once you try it and try any one of the tactics I talk about, you'll be amazed at how effective it is the very first time you try it. And by the third time you try it, you'll be an expert. It's simple and it works.
Right, amazing. Thank you for sharing. So the four toxins, my final question, the four toxins that you have distilled, that you talked about, fear, judgment, anger, ego. Most of us, the ego does come into play, and you talked about, you wanted to win. And most of us, yes, we never want to feel that, yes, we're wrong. And most people are stubborn, myself included. And I always want to feel that, yes, did you hear me? Did you hear what I said? And so, why do you think people want to win? Why do you think that is the case? What triggers in our mind?
Yeah, for many people, their sense of self worth is based
Mhm.
on being right and being able to defeat someone else. Because if you're dealing with someone who's powerful and you can defeat them, the mistaken belief is, oh, that means I'm even more powerful than they are. Now, if you're dealing with someone who is acutely aware of all of these things and is feeding your ego, well, you're not more powerful than they are. You just got played. So it's important to have a healthy dose of self awareness.
Mhm.
We've got ego, keep that in check. This need to win. Don't attach your sense of self with being able to win a particular discussion or an argument. I actually like it when somebody proves me wrong about something because
Right.
because on the other side of that, I realize, oh, well, they proved me wrong, but the benefit of that is I'm no longer wrong. Like it's embarrassing to be wrong. So if I can win an argument, even though I'm wrong because I have argumentative skills, I'll just continue going through life being wrong. And a lot of people are probably going to be looking at me and saying, that guy's wrong. He doesn't even realize it. That's embarrassing. I don't want that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, there are two sides. It's how do recognize, like I said, recognize your emotions. I mean, you have to put yourself in check. And I always like to recognize myself as to, like, what triggered me at that moment, so that I don't react to someone and I don't get into that conflict situation. Gabe, this has been such a phenomenal interview, such a great conversation. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you for
Thank you
having
so
me.
much.